Hello, dear students, and welcome to our course lecture series on strategic management. And I am your instructor, Dr. Jamal. All right, so we were studying chapter number 2, external environment, opportunities, threats, industry competition, and competitor analysis. And we covered those four, or you can say three and a half, learning objectives, in which we ended up some of the 7 factors of journal environment. All right, so let's continue from our lecture 3. And then today we'll talk about the 5 competitive forces, and then we talk about the firm's needs and all the stuff, right? So we are going to skip all those strategic groups because we're going to study in our coming lectures, right? So just the agenda of this chapter is to understand the external environment. So there are 7 segments of internal environment which just talk about demographic. All right, we ended our discussion on demographic. So we'll talk about the economic, sustainable, physical, sociocultural, global, technological, and political and legal. So, and then we talk about the industry analysis, and at the end, competitor environment. Right? So let's talk about the number second external environment, which is economic segment. So economic environment refers to nature and direction of economy in which a firm competes or may compete. The analyst must scan, monitor, forecast, and assess a number of key economic indicators or elements for both domestic and key international markets, including level of trends. For example, inflation rate, trade deficit and surplus, budget deficit and surplus, personal savings, business savings, GDP, currency valuation, unemployment rate, energy and commodity prices, right? So, in addition, the implementation of the change and trend in economic segment may affect the political legal system as well. All right. So when facing economic uncertainty, firms especially want to study closely the economic environment in multiple regions, countries throughout the world. All right. So implications of economic segment also affect the uh, political and legal system. So here comes the discussion on political and legal segment. So the political or legal segment is the arena in which organizations and interest groups compete for attention, resources, and a voice in overseeing the body of law, regulations, guiding the interactions among nations, as well as between firms and various local government agencies. In other words, this segment is concerned how interest groups and organizations attempt to influence representatives of the government or government agencies, how they are influenced by them. So this segment is also concerned with outcomes of legal proceedings in which the court interprets the various law and regulations. So because of the influence that this segment can have on the nature of competition as well as the overall profitability of industry, an individual firm analyst must assess changes and trends in administration policies regarding the country's antitrust laws. All right, the industry deregulation. Let me write it down here. Deregulation. You need to watch closely. Tax laws, labor training laws, commitments to education, free trade protectionism. Right. So it would be good to comment here that the strategies followed by firms as they attempt to manage or influence the political legal system, that how organizations try to influence governments. All right, how can individual firms and industries manage the effect of free trade that will lower the entry barriers? How they try to understand the current and projected influences of those governments on their competitive actions. So, what is likely to be the comparative impact of losing or loosening the government control in the entertainment industry, in the telecom industry? What strategies can firms use to manage or influence deregulation to their advantage? So the relationship between national, regional, and local laws and regulation create highly complex environment in which the business must navigate. Right? So here comes our next discussion on socio-cultural segment. So socio-culture segment is concerned with societal values and cultures. So this segment is basically important because the attitude and values of societies influence and thus are reflected in change in society's economic, demographic, political, legal, and technological segment. So analysts especially are cautioned here to pay attention to socio-cultural changes and effects that may have on workforce composition, change in attitude, values, change in attitudes about the growing number of contingency workers, shift in population towards suburbans, right? So farmers pay attention to these changes in order to stay ahead of their competitors and stay relevant in the minds of their customers. Like shift in work and career preferences, including the trend to work from home and you know through the advancement of technology, right? So here comes the discussion on the next segment, technological segments, which include the institutions and activities involved in creating new knowledge and translating that knowledge into new outputs, products, processes, materials. As we discussed in our chapter 1, the previous lecture 1, lecture 2, that key driver of new competitive landscape is is technological change that can have a broad effects on societies. The firm should pay attention to the technological segment since early adopters can gain market shares and above average return. Remember, first movers get all the benefits. Movers. For example, Tesla. Now we have seen that there are many firms that are in EV business, but the Tesla is a name and sound quality. Everybody knows about Tesla in EV industry. All right, so let's move forward. Okay, let's move forward. Now, the next one is global segment. So, factors in global segment that should be assessed, they are potential impact of significant international events such as a peace in Middle East or a recent entry of China into WTO, the identification of both important emerging global markets and global trend towards global outsourcing, right? So When studying the global segments, firms should recognize the globalization of business markets that may create opportunities for the new markets as well as threats that competitors from other economies may enter the market, right? So the difference between cultural and institutional attributes of individual global markets, for example, the focus in Korea is in Hwa or harmony based on respect of hierarchical relationship and obedience to the authority. The focus in China is on Guanxi, right? So firms competing in global markets should recognize the social culture and institutional attributes like I talked here, Guanxi in China. So the difference between cultural and institutional attributes of individual global markets, they play a very important role in global segment. In global market expansion opportunities as well. So the informal economy is another aspect of global segment of that requiring the analysis. So the one term that in our previous slide was the global focusing, which is a cautious approach to globalization in which firms focus on global niche markets. So in this global focusing, the firms with a moderate level of international operation increase their internationalization by focusing on global niche marketing, which means limiting operations sales to one geographical region of the world, niche marketing. This approach allows firms to build and use their competencies while limiting their risk within the niche market. All right. Another important point that should be noted in global segment is the expanding access to the resources firms need from the firm needs for success. For example, capital needs. You can have capital from New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, just listing your company over there. Maybe you're an African company, maybe you're a Chinese company, right? But you can go into NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange to raise the capital. And the next one is the sustainable physical environment. So the sustainable physical environment refers potential and actual changes in the physical environment and business practices that are intended to positively respond to and deal with those changes in order to create sustainable environment. So ecological, social, economic systems interact to influence what happens in this segment. Global warming, energy consumptions, and sustainability all are examples of issues related in physical environment, right? So it's concerned with trends oriented in sustaining the world's physical environment. PAM recognizes the ecological, social, economic systems, right? So an increasing number of companies are investing in sustainable developments. Like Nestle has invested their, resources for paper straws for their juices, right? Rather than having traditional plastic straws to drink the juice from their packs, they just introduce paper straw, right? So they are concerning about the physical environment, ecological system, right? And here comes our industry analysis. So we have completed the journal environment. Now industry analysis. So industry analysis is a group of firms producing products that are close substitute for each other. As they compete for market share, the strategies implemented by these companies influence each other and include a broad mix of competitive strategies as each company pursues strategic competitiveness and going for above average return. Let me show, it should be noted here that unlike the journal environment, which has an indirect effect on strategic competitiveness and firms' profitability, the effect of industry environment is a direct effect. So industry profitability and intensity of competition in an organization or industry are function of five forces here. Number one, threat posed by new entrants, power of suppliers, power of buyers, product substitute, intense rivalry among competitors. Right, so we'll discuss this one by one, but call these the five forces of competitive model. We also call this Porter five forces model, right? So one is threat of new entrants, bargaining power of suppliers, bargaining power of buyers, threat of substitute, and rivalry among competitive firms. So number one is threat of new entrant. New entrants to an industry are important because with new competitors, the intensity of competitive rivalry in an industry generally increases because new entrant come, it asks about market share or it attract market share, and of course existing firms customer will go to this new firm, right? They give discounts, attract new customers, right? Because customers are the same, they are not increasing or decreasing, they are the same. So market share is going to be disturbed. So they can act as a competitive rivalry. So if a new competitor brings additional capacity to the industry when product demand is not increasing, so prices that can be charged to customer generally, they will fall. So one result may be price decline and also decline in sales. When decline in sales, it turns out, right? So to help you grasp the potential impact of new entrant in the industry, it is helpful to illustrate this effect referring to a number of examples here. For example, the transformation of steel industry with mini mills entered the industry in competition while integrated domestic producers such as US Steel and Bathalman Steel. Similarly, the impact of increase in number of cell phones providers on cost of having a cell phone, this also provided competition. So increase in the number of internet access providers and effect of increased competition in firms like CompuSave and American Online, the price decreases. So firms considering entering an industry study entry barriers to determine the likelihood of being able to identify and attract competitive position within the industry. All right. So barrier to entry in an industry are present when entry is difficult or when it is too costly and places a potential entrant at a competitive disadvantage because it is huge cost to start a business. For example, the telephone industry, the telecommunication provider, the tower costs, those technology who transmit signals and to the masses. It's huge cost to start a business. So it is also an advantage because new entrant firm will have to take so much money to install poles and then dishes and then receivers and then signals quality 5G, 6G, 4G in some areas. It's too much cost. So that also benefit the existing uh, firms. That new entrant, when they see all those costs, they just raise their hand and say, no, we don't want to come inside, right? So there are several significant barriers: economies of scale, product differentiation, capital requirements, switching costs, access to distribution channels, costs disadvantage independent of scales, and government policies. So let's discuss one by one. Economies of scale. Economies of scale refers to the relationship between quantity produced and unit cost. So I'm going to give you an example which is more, because this concept is more economic based. Here we go. So the average total cost is basically a U-shaped curve like this, right? So this is the marvel of, you can say that, average total cost, because the normal layman concept is that when we produce more, right, quantity increases. When you produce more, the cost also should increase. But this is the magic here. When you produce more, the cost started to decrease. Why? Because fixed cost is now spread on number of units. When you produce more, average cost started to decrease. At some point, it stayed the same. From here to here, it stays the same. And then when you produce from this, let's say Q0 to Q1 here, start to increase. Economies of scale is this area. So when you increase your production, your cost started to decrease rather than increase. So if you manage to stay your business here in this first half of U-shaped curve, which is every total cost, you are in economies of scale, right? So economies of scale can be overcome by potential entry of barriers if the firms that produce multiple customized products or that enter an industry on a large enough scale. Big companies, they enter the market because they know that they have the capabilities to install the new technology, and they can also produce at first half of U-shaped curve of every total cost, right? Now, the threat of new entrant, product differentiation. If the product is unique, only you have access, then chances that new entrants will not enter to the market. If the product is generally the same or identical, then other firms, of course, definitely enter the market, right? Then what causes barrier to entry is the capital requirement. I told you, if the initial cost is huge, for example, railways, you need huge infrastructure of bridges, railroads, right? So that also creates a barrier. So competing in new industry requires firms to have capital or physical, the capital for physical facilities, inventories, market activities, and other capital and other critical business functions. So the capital requirement for successful market entry may not be available to pursue the market opportunities. Only you have that capital, you have that railways. So others, when they see all those huge costs and capital requirement, they just raise their hand and then say that, no, we are not going to enter the market. Despite there is huge profit, but initial requirement is so huge. Now switching costs. The switching costs These are the one-time costs customer will incur when they buy from different suppliers. So they can include such as explicit cost as retaining of employees or retooling of equipment, as well as physics, as well as psychological cost of changing relationship. Sorry. So the firms in industry generally try to establish switching costs to offset new entrants as they try to win customers' satisfaction with substantially lowering the price, right? And offer a much better product. The next is access to distribution channels. An existing firm in an industry generally have developed effective channels for distribution. So these same channels may not be available for new entrants firm. So thus it is like a barrier to a new entrant. So when the new entrants may use price breaks and cooperative advertisement allowance to pursue distributor to carry their products, they have to they have to pay those distributors a huge amount of sums or increased, you know, commissions and all the stuff, which is also a increase on their costs and ultimately costing their profits to decrease. So that can also add barriers to new entrant. Then costs, disadvantages independent of scale. So existing firms in an industry often are able to achieve cost advantages that cannot be duplicated by new entrants. So successful competition requires new entrants to reduce strategic cost of advantage held by their competitors. That for proprietary product technology, people access to raw materials, desirable locations, government subsidies, right? And the last one, of course, the government policies. Government here is the biggest actor or player in threat of new entrant. What if government give you exclusive right to operate? Then no one dare to come for your competition, right? If government give you license or permit to mine gold, silver, copper, coal, right? Government's deregulation as well gonna either allow new entrant to come, right? So government is so much powerful. Also antitrust issues. What if governments see the behavior of those monopolists, right? Government see that whether you are working for your own pockets, increasing the price without producing enough, are you creating shortage for the people or for the customers, intentional shortages or intentionally increasing the price. The government will monitor whether you are becoming monopoly or not, whether you are involved in collusion or not. The next is bargaining power of suppliers. Remember, they can also pose a huge amount of threat if suppliers increase their prices, reduce their quality. So ultimately, it affects your product. What if you ordered, the raw material, and the suppliers say that no, I cannot provide you at this time. Your whole supply chain gonna disturb. So supplier group is powerful when it is dominated by a few large companies. The less suppliers you have, the more power suppliers have to manipulate you, to influence you, to raise the raw material prices. All right. So suppliers can also be a threat if they have the unique product. For example, in case of Congo, Congo has worth more than 60% cobalt mines. So cobalt prices are So Congo can set cobalt prices. If they refuses to sell cobalt to iPhone parts makers because cobalt gonna use in laptops, circuits, tablets, mobile phones, iPhone, iPads. What if they say no or they increase the prices of cobalt, then all the companies or all the producers who are producing cobalt, they are going to increase the prices. Then what happens? Ultimately, your cost of production rises and you have to increase the price, which can be dangerous as well to maintain your industry presence. So it poses a credible threat to integrate forward into buyers industry as well, because buyers, they are affected by law of demand. Price increases, quantity purchase, quantity demanded go down, right? So here comes the bargaining power of buyers. If your percentage of sales depends on few buyers, few institutional buyers, then there is a huge power of buyers as well. So buyers can also demand lower price but high quality product. They can also demand greater services. They can also demand lower prices. And if since you have low number of buyers, you don't have more customer base or more buyers, then fewer buyers can influence your output as well, your pricing as well, your quality status as well. So customers are more powerful when they purchase a large portion of the industry total output. They could switch to another product if they have the option, if they have options to change, or if they have the option to switch, if they have the substitution, they have the power. All right. If you are selling the standard product, undifferentiated one, then they have more power because they can substitute. All right. Here comes then threat of substitute. Substitute products are goods or services from outside given industry that perform similar or same function as a product that the industry produces. So in general, product substitute presents a strong threat to firms when the customer face few or if any switching costs. Right? If customer has to switch to another product without paying huge costs, then of course he will leave you, right? Substitute product if the price is lower. All right. Substitute products quality and performance are equal to greater than those in competitive product. All right. So to reduce the substitute attractiveness, a firms can differentiate a product. So that's why you have seen that in printers, they are not making standard cartridges, right? So printer cost is lower, but cartridges cost is higher and with different sizes. So HP printer cartridge cannot be installed in Fuji printer, right? Similarly, in similarly, those other brands, I just skip my mind. HP printers, Dell printers, Fuji printers, Xerox printers, they have different cartridges, size, and all the stuff. So in order to reduce the power of substituted products, what a company can do, can make quality oriented products, can provide services after sales, warranty, guarantee, repairing, and also provide services or qualities and sales at different location convenient to customers, so that customers, it is available for their reach, easy access, it is in their reach, right? Now, the intensity of the rivalry among the competitors. So, competitive rivalry intensifies when a firm is challenged by competitor actions. All right, because your product and competitor product are largely the same, and if he reduces the prices, your customer will go to buy his product, his quantity demanded rises. So a company recognizes this opportunity to improve its market position. So they basically take away your customers by reducing the price. And customer think that okay, switching cost is lower, quality of the quality of the product is the same, so they will go to where price is lower. So common dimension of rivalry either are on services, price, and innovation. So factors that increases the intensity of rivalry among the firms include numerous or equally balanced competitors. If both firms are equal in size and industry growth is slow, and everybody wants to increase profit by grabbing more market share, so they enter into a rivalry, competition, price war. Or if there is a high fixed cost, high storage cost, in case of you can see that Coca-Cola and Pepsi, high storage cost. Once the beverage is produced and it has to be saved in cool and dry places, high fixed costs and high storage costs needed. Low switching costs, like I told you before. High strategic stakes are involved, and high exit barrier. Exit barrier. Firm cannot exit easily. If they want to exit, they have to, you know, sell all of their assets on salvage value. All right. So the industry analysis, how you interpret it. The analysis of the five forces within the given industry allow the firm to determine the industry attractiveness in terms of potential earn above average return. An unattractive industry, they have low entry barriers, right? Suppliers and buyers have high bargaining positions. Suppliers can increase their raw material prices. Buyers can persuade you to decrease the prices, improve the quality, right? Strong competitive threats from product substitutes. Intense rivalry is there. That industry is very unattractive for you. An attractive or attractive industry, high barriers, so you can enjoy high prices, high profits. Bargaining power of supplier and buyer is low. Switching cost is high or few competitive threats for your product. And rivalry is moderate. All right, that's how you interpret the industry analysis. All right, so that's all for our today's discussion. In our next class, we talk about competitor analysis. All right, so see you in lecture 5. Take care. Bye bye.